We want to talk about the Bills. I'm interested, I feel like you kind of got to start back at the beginning to move forward. What was your biggest takeaway from the Bills last season?
I thought they did a really good job of trying to adapt and create strategic advantages over the course of the year. It's very rare that a guy like Brian Daboll would all of a sudden move up to the coaching booth and start using a lot different personnel groupings and run at a higher tempo of offense. But they made some very sound strategic decisions to do that. And they did so mid-season, not even with a bye week to prepare for that. And it definitely benefited them during the course of the end of the season. So that was one of the biggest things to me, was just their willingness to make changes and do what's in the best interest of their team and their team's ability to win games. It's a very positive indicator moving forward. Too many teams would be reluctant to do that, particularly not with a bye week to prepare for it, and probably wouldn't make those changes until maybe the off season. And so the fact that they were able to do that gives me a little bit of comfort knowing that they are aggressively pursuing whatever's in their best interest of winning games.
Obviously, what's in the best interest. Well, I want to get to Daboll in a second, but I want to ask first about Josh Allen because it seems like, the Bills ride or die with Josh Allen right now. Have your opinions on him changed as maybe more data has come out than when he was thought of when he came out of Wyoming as a project? Have your thoughts on him changed over his 2 years?
Well, that's a hard question because I was very down on Josh Allen as a prospect entering the NFL. And so from that perspective, I think my opinion has improved slightly because of A, what I perceive to be his leadership, and B, his, I don't know the word, moxie or gusto, his ability to do whatever it takes to try to get first downs with his legs and his aggressiveness and his fearlessness inside of the pocket. So from that perspective, like seeing that on display at the NFL level has definitely improved a bit for me. Where I do see issues with him though, and things that I didn't like in college were some of the accuracies and deep passing accuracies and things of that nature. But what I've gleaned is a sense from Buffalo that they understand those deficiencies and they're trying to figure out a way to minimize them. And we saw, his rookie season, they had some taller, lankier receivers out there on the field. And what they went with, these guys, wider catch radiuses, but a little bit slower and more difficult to gain separation. What they've sort of moved to the direction of are guys that are more precise route runners, a little bit shorter, but faster guys that are quicker and are able to get open to give Josh Allen a better view of where to throw the football. So I don't know that he's gotten better from like an accuracy perspective, but they're trying to minimize those issues. And I think that that's intelligent.
Absolutely. Is he hard to evaluate in your sense? Because I think we can all agree that he made strides from his first year to his second year, but still he's last in completion percentage. Some of the big major factors, really poor on the deep ball last year. But like you said, it's hard to evaluate moxie. It's hard to find a stat, especially in your field where that's where your bread and butter is. Is it hard to evaluate a guy like Josh Allen?
It is to some extent. I mean, there are obviously pluses that are gained by running quarterback. And so from that perspective, it is a benefit to have a guy like him. And so you're factoring that in. As a passer, that's really where you make your bread and butter, though. You're going to be passing far more than you're going to be running as a quarterback in the NFL, and that's the quickest path to victory in games. So there has got to be an emphasis in terms of figuring out how to improve his efficiency from the pocket as a passer. You get a little bit of extra efficiency by him being able to run the ball. What you have to do is you have to get that where it's extra difficult for an offense to defend. When you get that extra, for a defense to defend, when he's running the ball at the exact right times to run the ball, or when the defense has to drop an extra guy down in the box to stop the runs, that's where you're gaining an advantage in his ability to pass the ball. If you look at a guy like Cam Newton, for example, the NFL average when you're split in 11 personnel, which is very relevant to Buffalo because you guys use so much 11, and I'm sure you will with Diggs here now. 11 personnel, defenses typically use dime 17% of the time, dime and 6+ DBs out on the field. However, when Cam was last healthy in 2018, defenses used dime against 11 personnel only 7% of the time. So he was facing far fewer DBs to have to deal with in the passing game, able to get a little bit more often mismatches where a linebacker is having to cover a tight end or a running back. And in those particular instances, when you move some guys around, you're able to get mismatches pre-snap. And so I think it's very important that they utilize Josh Allen a little bit differently so that they can get those extra guys down in the box or get those defense to play with a certain personnel grouping that then is going to benefit them. So they need to use the running a little bit more tactically to help his passing game. And then I think that they're on the right path with the way that they're going to help increase his efficiency. But at the end of the day, it really does come down to, can he do it or can he not? And last season, my big concern about them this year is last year they played the 8th easiest schedule of opposing pass defenses. This year, they're going to play the 8th toughest schedule of pass defenses. That's the number one most difficult leap in difficulty of opposing pass defenses for any team in the NFL. So it's going to be very evident whether Diggs and the things that they're doing in the passing game are going to work, because last year they were playing overall easier pass defenses.
That is why you are so good at what you did. I had no idea about that, defenses and the easiest to the hardest. So that's really, important. Like you're saying, using the run to your advantage, but at the end of the day, you're still going to have to make a throw to take advantage of that.
Yeah, absolutely. Because quarterbacks are going to be passing far more than what they're going to be running. You want primarily, we got to preserve player health and safety too. We want Josh Allen to be able to win games, but also have a good career. We invested a lot in him. So what we need to do is have him running the ball in the most high leverage situations. Some of those are going to be in the red zone. Some of those are going to be 3rd or 4th down type situations. Some are going to be when there's an obvious running lane, taking advantage of that as a defense has too many guys in coverage, playing man up, backs turned to the quarterback, take advantage of that, but get down appropriately. But then other situations, you want to threaten the fact that they've shown us that they might run the ball with the quarterback here. We need to have an extra guy to account for that defensively. And then when they have that extra guy to account for it, that's when you're audibling to a pass play to take advantage of mismatches, because you're getting the defense into a look that you want.
Absolutely. Going back to Brian Daboll, and you talked about 11 personnel, which is 1 running back, 1 tight end. Did they do more of that towards the end of the season? I was critical of the Bills' offense and their struggles where they were a team that was winning, but they were only averaging 18 points a game. And you just know that long term, that's not going to be successful enough to win in this current NFL. Was there something that Daboll did that second half of the year that really seemed to click their offense?
Yeah, well, he moved to the booth, and what they decided to do is we're going to go more up tempo. And I'm not sure what the impetus was for doing that, why they decided to do that, but because Daboll's never been up in the booth. But when he went up in the booth, and you decide we want to go a little bit more up tempo so that Daboll can radio things down to Josh Allen and help him get into the right play, because the communication cuts off with 15 seconds left in the play clock. And so if Allen's getting to the line late because they're radioing in a play slowly, then you're not going to be able to have that communication. So what they decided to do is we want to go fast, get to the line of scrimmage quicker, so we have more time to radio things in. Well, the only way you can get to the line of scrimmage quicker is if you keep the same personnel out on the field. So they effectively did what Sean McVay was doing in LA with Jared Goff, where they were staying in 11, a lot of 11 personnel, and getting to the line of scrimmage quickly so that Daboll could help his quarterback, or in McVay's case, he could help his quarterback, Jared Goff, get into the right play call earlier so that now we're matched up against the defense better. You also can help tire out the defense that way, keep their same personnel out on the field, which is very important primarily when you're moving from like a 1st and long to like a 2nd and short type situation, because now we've got our 1st down defense out on the field, and we can prevent the short yardage defense from entering the game if we stay going quicker. A lot of times the defense has to play a little bit more of their base personnel as opposed to get more situationally adjusted to what down and distance that you're in. So they definitely made those changes, and it was a benefit. They were actually getting a little bit more productivity out of the offense when they were doing those things. But I still think that there's more that they could do. I think that there's a next level that they could take things to potentially this upcoming season.
And talking about this upcoming season, how much does Diggs add to that offense? And on the other side, how much do teams now have to defenses need to factor in for a guy like Stefon Diggs? Like, how does he change the Bills' offense this season and the way that opposing defenses are going to prepare for the Bills?
Well, Diggs is obviously one of the better route runners and precision guys in the NFL. He's dangerous deep. He's good running short. And when you pair him with a guy like John Brown, who's got a little bit of speed, and Cole Beasley, who's really good in the slot, that's a very effective 11 personnel unit out there, where there's not really any way, if defenses try to double up or try to take away one of those guys by focusing a little bit too much on him, these other guys can beat you. They are guys that are going to be able to beat coverages. So what it does is it gives them more options. It's going to force the defense to play a little bit truer. And then if all the guys have the similar level of coverage, if the defenses can't focus too much on any one of the three because they have three viable weapons, then what inevitably will happen is you're going to have Josh Allen. He's going to have to find those open guys, because one of those guys is probably going to get open. He's got to be well versed and practiced in what's my first read on this concept, where am I looking first, and then how do I get to number two quickly if number one is covered. But there should be guys that you're able to work the ball to. I mean, if you look at a younger quarterback like a Sam Darnold, or also another quarterback in New York like a Daniel Jones, where they weren't able to work to their number two options, like Daniel Jones, for example, he didn't throw the ball very deep. Josh Allen throws the ball deep a lot more often, but Daniel Jones threw the ball a little bit more shorter, a little bit more of a conservative passer, but he's constantly throwing last year into these tight windows, like tight coverage. You can look at the advanced metrics and some of the player tracking data to see that there's very little separation between the guy he targeted and the nearest defender. That's very bad. We don't want to be throwing the ball into those closely contested situations. So it's up to Josh Allen to find guys that have more open ground, more space, and get the ball into that guy quickly. So it's a matter of being able to quickly read the defense and go through your progressions. But Stefon Diggs definitely provides that ability to keep defenses honest and make them pay if they're too honest and they're not giving him as much attention.
Absolutely. I'd like to flip over to the other side of the ball just for one question, because I'm curious to know, does Trey White, do the stats not show how successful or how valuable Trey White really is to that defense? I mean, I know it's a unit, it's McDermott's whole unit, but what he's brought into that defense, do you think he gets enough credit for what he's doing?
On a national level, absolutely not. I mean, I think obviously Sean McVay and the rest of the defense knows exactly how valuable he is, but we typically look at star power offensively, and defensively, it's hard to play defense in the modern day NFL. The rules construct is working completely against you. Offenses definitely have the upper hand across the board, and so there are plays that you're going to give up routinely. And I think especially with like the fantasy football era of things, that everything's about the offense, very little is about the defense right now. Tre'Davious White is absolutely incredible and doesn't get the level of recognition that he deserves, but he's a massive difference maker for the defense. His presence out there helps dictate what the offense is going to do and where they're going to look, where the quarterback is going to look. And anytime you have a guy like that who suddenly has started to gain a little bit more respect in recent years, then that's going to really affect the quarterback pre-snap. Well, where is this guy? Where is he lining up? What do I need to do differently now? And all of a sudden, your defense is able to help better predict where that quarterback might be looking to go with the ball. And predictability is key. On the defensive side of the football, anytime you can get the offense to be even in the littlest bit predictable, that goes a long way towards your ability to level the playing field and even up the scales in terms of how big of an advantage that offense has.
Makes a lot of sense, knowing that if Trey's on this side or on one side of the field, more often than not, offenses are going to probably shy away from that side, is kind of what you're saying, and then you're going to look towards the other side. That little bit makes a huge difference.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It helps the safeties. It helps this whole secondary in general. it helps the pass rush too, with like where the quarterback might be stepping or where the quarterback might be looking. So all of those things are a definite factor. And then you have confidence that, White's going to do a good job against with his responsibility. So it's very unlikely that area of the field is the field that you're going to give up a key or important play.
Absolutely. Looking at the whole unit, the whole Bills team, is there a player that you have seen maybe as you've gone through, and I don't want to give away the book because I'm sure there's maybe a little bit in there, but of somebody that you think is poised to have a breakout season on the Bills roster, offense or defense?
Well, look, I do think that you've got Dawson Knox is a very talented player, and I think relying a little bit more on the tight end, you have to get the O-line to give the proper amount of protection so that he can get out a little bit more often. But I think he's a valuable asset to this team. And then I really think Zach Moss has the ability. I know Singletary obviously is the number one, but I think Zach Moss fits a lot of the things that they'd be looking to do, and they're smart to keep Singletary's workload a little bit more balanced. Last year they were giving up a lot of that to running back number 2, who's no longer there in terms of Frank Gore. So now you've got a lot of opportunities that's going to be able to filter down to Zach Moss, and I think he's going to be able to take advantage of that. So he is like a backup running back, and also your tight end, Dawson Knox. I think that those two guys could play key roles for your offense this upcoming season.
Switching gears, I just want to ask one quick question around the rest of the AFC East, because I know you're a big Cam Newton fan and you like what he brings. How much does he change the division with him now being in New England? Because before that, a lot of people in here, and Buffalo still may be the team to beat. The Bills probably still have the deepest roster, but Cam coming into New England really seems to flip things over than what it was earlier in the offseason when Cam was, a free agent. How much does he change this AFC East?
Well, it's a massive adjustment, right? Teams have been accustomed to playing a drop-back pocket passer in New England for so many years. And now you have a guy like Cam. It's a completely different script. You're able to do so much more. Obviously, Josh McDaniels is going to have to figure out new things to call, but he's going to love that challenge. He's going to be able to call a lot of things that I'm sure that he's been building up in his playbook that he has seen over the last decade plus in the NFL that he's wished that he could use in New England a little bit. Obviously, he's grateful to have Tom Brady, one of the best of all time. So, but now that he's got the opportunity to do that with Cam, it's just going to be something different. Like defenses build up themselves to figure out how to stop a certain type of offense, a certain type of quarterback over the years. You've always viewed, and as have the other AFC East teams, we got to get through the Patriots. If we want to win this division to make our life easier in the postseason, we got to get through the Patriots. How are we going to do that? Well, we know they're basically reliant upon their offense most years, except for last year. Their defense hasn't been nearly as good as the offense. So we've got to figure out how we're going to be able to defend that offense. And now you've got a guy who can run the ball. As I said previously, defenses defend him differently. They use less dime packages against 11 personnel when Cam is the quarterback. They also tend to put more defenders in the box. But the one thing that Cam's able to do, like for instance, New England in the 2018 season, when they ended up going and winning the Super Bowl, that year they had a top 10 rushing offense. However, they were only actually really good against light boxes of 6 or fewer defenders. Tom Brady got the defense to dictate what they were doing, and then was able to run the ball against these light boxes at a high enough rate. So they were the number 2 team in the NFL running against these light boxes. But against 7 men, which is the average box count, or 8-man boxes, they were actually merely average. Whereas Cam in 2018, that rushing attack was top 5 against 6 or fewer man boxes, against the average box count of 7, and against 8+ man boxes. Like even against those tough box counts, they're still able to run the football. So that does 2 things that Tom Brady never had the luxury of up in New England. And I think there's a lot of opportunities for them. But as you said, I mean, there's a lot of question marks too. It's a new offense, a bad time in our life to be switching teams, bringing on a new quarterback, changing up a lot of your philosophy offensively. So it's not going to be maybe a super smooth transition early, but I would definitely rather, if I'm the Bills, I'd definitely be rather facing Jarrett Stidham than I would be facing Cam Newton, with the possibility that if Cam doesn't work out now, I have to deal with Stidham.
Yeah. And one last thing, I think you hit the nail on the head there at the end, because we're looking around saying how fortunate the Bills are to be having the same coordinators, the same head coach, the same quarterback, all 5 offensive linemen coming back, pretty much 10 out of 11 guys on both sides of the ball. How valuable is continuity in this offseason where they're just doing a lot of this? That I know they've had some workouts and private team workouts, but this has been pretty much the majority of how they've been installing game plans. How big is it for Brian Daboll and Sean McDermott to just kind of be picking up where they left off and nothing really new?
I think it's huge. It's definitely one of the things as I'm looking through which teams I believe are best suited to hit their goals in 2020, because we talked about goals and how important that is. Hitting those goals, definitely a big advantage to teams with the same quarterback, same play caller, primarily the same offensive line. The continuity in those 3 areas offensively are really what's going to drive it. It's easy to work in a guy like Stefon Diggs into the mix. But if you have your same quarterback, your same philosophy offensively, and a solid offensive line, like with continuity, like that's a big, big factor. And so as I'm going through the NFL and looking at offenses that are most likely to kind of get started faster, because I think some of the other teams will mesh and gel eventually, but this, to start the year at least, you're going to want to look more towards the teams that have had this benefit of the continuity like the Buffalo Bills have.
I really appreciate your time. Make sure everybody, if you don't already, at Sharp Football, there's also the sharpfootballanalysis.com, and make sure to check out the Football Preview 2020 by Warren Sharp. Warren, thank you so much for your time, man. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for having me.